Welcome to Crossroads. President Donald Trump has doubled down against migration from third world countries, and he has now officially put migration on hold totally from 19 high-risk countries, and probably more to be added. Meanwhile, the whole controversy around the so-called double tap airstrike on a drug trafficking boat, it's slowly unraveling, as I said it would. And veterans are also now stepping forward to say what I've been saying as well. Agree with it or not, on a moral level, but this type of practice during airstrikes on terrorists is fairly common. Also, meanwhile, affordable housing in the United States is not necessarily affordable, if you haven't noticed, but prices have been suddenly dropping, and this is being credited to deportations, freeing up more homes. And also, big news, a suspect has now been allegedly arrested on the J6 pipe bomb case. We'll be talking about all these, a lot more today. Make sure to hit the like button, leave a comment below. Let's get started. All right, first off, after announcing his plans to pause migration from basically all third world countries, which is most of the world, by the way, President Donald Trump has now taken the first steps for this. He has officially put migration on hold from 19 countries. And what does this hold entail? Well, it means that all immigration applications, including green cards, including U.S. citizenship processing and the like, filed by immigrants from these countries are now on pause. No more on hold if you're from one of these countries. Although it is a little bit broader, it's extending to others as well, but especially these ones. This is the official statement, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It says this, quote, effective immediately. This memorandum directs U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services personnel to 1. Place a hold on all forms. This is I-589, applications for asylum and for withholding or removal, regardless of the alien's country of nationality, pending a comprehensive review. Now, briefly on this statement is not limited to these 19 countries. In fact, a lot of this is not, but I'll be getting into it. This is not limited to these 19 countries. This basically means no matter which country you're from, no matter where you're from, if you're applying for asylum or for withholding of removal, meaning they're trying to get rid of you and they can't, it's all on hold. It doesn't mean you're going to be denied, but they're going to put it on hold until they do a, quote, comprehensive review. They're reevaluating every single amnesty case. Number 2, it says, place a hold on pending benefits requests, pending a comprehensive review regardless of entry date. Meaning if you've been getting benefits from America, those are all going to be reviewed. They're going to look into all of it. 3, conduct a comprehensive re-review of approved benefit requests for aliens from countries listed in PP 10949 who entered the United States on or after January 20, 2021. Basically meaning, during this encompasses the Biden administration. So if you are an individual who came in during the Biden administration, no matter what the status was, you were given temporary protection status, meaning the Biden administration, meaning you're not really an illegal immigrant. They let you in legally, they processed you, they gave you your papers, you were being put through the whole thing where they're giving you a free house and 4-star or 5-star hotel and 3 meals a day and everything else. Basically, every one of those people is going to be re-reviewed. And what that also means is that in states where they're continuing to receive benefits, right, because TPA, right, TPS, temporary protection status, does give them these benefits. And the Biden administration would also put a lot of them on parole because, as many of you know, non-citizens are not legally or technically allowed to receive taxpayer-funded benefits in the United States. They found a way around that by putting them on parole or in states where it's illegal for local officials to ask about your migration status. They were bypassing those laws. They're now going to review all these people, all of them who came in during the Biden administration especially. Now it says this, quote, this memorandum mandates that all aliens meeting these criteria undergo a thorough re-review process, including a potential interview and, if necessary, a re-interview to fully assess all national security and public safety threats, along with any other related grounds of inadmissibility or ineligibility. It also says an individualized case-by-case review and assessment will be done of all relevant information and facts. Basically, the problem is, look, in the United States, we have a lot of people legitimately applying for asylum. You want to get my opinion on it? I think that's a good thing. I think it is something that we stand for as a country. There are people legitimately fleeing persecution who will legitimately be beheaded or tortured or go back to their countries. And America, and frankly, just mostly the Western world, lets them in. So even if they're not allowed here, maybe they can go to Canada, right? But the problem you had with the mass migration that has taken place is you had non-governmental organizations, basically, well, they were coaching people, giving them materials, telling them the keywords to use so they could register on the whole program of amnesty. I fear for my life, I'm in danger, I need to apply for amnesty. And those were the magic words, open sesame, and you were let right into the United States and put in the very long line, which has been gummed up by literally tens of millions of people who've been basically defrauding the United States to do this. The problem that's caused, though, is illegitimate cases have now been gummed up with the legitimate cases. And it is a problem for the United States because how are they going to sort them out? Because if the United States were to just deport everybody at this point, which some people say they should, you will have a lot of people who will go back to the countries they came from who legitimately needed it, and they will be murdered or tortured or imprisoned. And whilst you could argue it's not America's problem, it does represent some part of our character, of what we represent in terms of the global world order and the basic idea of human rights. And so we can't, on a moral level, I don't think we should do that. And so the way the Trump administration is doing this is taking that into consideration. They're looking into, basically, were you defrauding America? Which country are you from? What is the basis of you claiming you can't go back because you'll be persecuted? And big news, if you come from a country and they just have too many cartels, that's not a reason to come here, okay? If you're afraid of gang violence, it's not really a reason to come here. And that's how they're going to be looking at it. Also, the big question is, have you been getting taxpayer-funded benefits? If you came here and you're getting welfare, you came here, you're getting food stamps, you came here and you're not really contributing to society, you came here and you never bothered learning English, they're going to take all that into consideration also. And so, the other question is, America's basically extending an open door to you. Have you treated that with respect, or have you been taking advantage of it? That is the basis of the way they're going to be looking at it. Now, they continue, though, stating this, that USCIS will also conduct a comprehensive review of all relevant policies, procedures, and operational guidance for compliance, accuracy, and needed improvements during this time, meaning they're probably going to reformat the system so that we don't have problems like this again of people just massively defrauding the American, open-armed, come in if you're injured system, right? Now, it adds further in that on January 20, 2025, the president issued, this is Trump, of course, Executive Order 14161, titled Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorist and Other National Security and Public Safety Threats. This order aims to safeguard U.S. citizens from aliens who may seek to commit terrorist acts, pose threats to national security, promote hateful ideologies like socialism or communism or radical Islam for that point, which actually is one of the big forms they're looking at with this. They're even making anti-Semitism on a ground for possible expulsion, by the way, in terms of previous executive orders. And it says, or exploit immigration laws for malicious purpose, meaning all those people who've been defrauding the immigration system. It adds, quote, EO 1461 underscores the importance of vigilance during the visa issuance process to ensure that individuals approved for admission into the United States do not intend to harm Americans or compromise U.S. national interests. Now, this actually ties into the 19 countries that are being looked at in terms of, well, maybe we should pause it entirely, and they could raise this to more than 30. They've now done this. So the 19 countries there are now pauses on with this. They are Afghanistan, Myanmar or Burma, Chad, the Republic of Congo, the Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, the one that Trump's been talking about a lot lately, Sudan and Yemen, and added restricted access. This includes Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. If you remember during Trump's first term in office, he had what media framed as the Muslim ban. It wasn't really a Muslim ban. He was still allowing migration from many Muslim countries. This is similar, though. They're actually looking at bans on countries that have problems of terrorism. If you're from a country that has a problem of terrorism, they might block you entirely. And it also extends to countries that have problems of just other issues like Venezuela, where you have gangs and people defrauding the American system and so on. It's interesting they even have Cuba on there, because it used to be that if you were from Cuba and you set foot on American soil, you were basically protected. But they have Cuba on there too. Now, some context on this. Back in June, Trump placed both a full and partial travel ban on these countries I just mentioned. So this is not technically a big change, but he just kind of expanded it, is what happened. He's now taking it a step further. And what he's doing, instead of just a minor restriction, he's pausing all immigration applications from these countries, all 19 of them. And on that point also, it might not even be limited to these countries. They might expand them because they've been talking about it. Now, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, she's suggested they may add an additional 11 to 13 more countries to this list. And it's not fully clear what these countries are going to be. We don't know for a fact. But based on their statements, which they have hinted at it and they've talked about what this may entail, it's basically looking like it's going to be almost the entire continent of Africa, almost nothing from Africa, unless you're the Afrikaners or the white farmers in South Africa, or Christians being persecuted in Nigeria or something like that. Trump is looking to bring in persecuted Christians. But this will also include Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Philippines, possibly, and many countries in the Middle East, including Syria and Lebanon. Basically, countries that have just... Trump is basically, he is stating, if you're from a country that historically has problems of terrorism, historically the people who migrate from your country to the United States turn out to be a net negative rather than a net positive, he doesn't want you here. And he's saying that very directly. A lot of people are accusing him of racism for saying this, and Trump literally just said, I don't care. He actually said that. He says, people say you can't say this. He says, I don't care. And he's basically, he is just directly insulting a lot of countries. He's saying they contribute nothing, they're failed states, and he does not want them in the country. He's been really singling out Somalia on this, but he's applying this in a more broader level. He's saying that from many countries, people migrate here and they just all go on welfare. He said with the Somali community, you're talking like 80% on welfare, according to him. And many of these countries as well, when they come here, they bring a lot of problems, gang violence, criminality, basically the problems they have in their countries come here. Trump is discussing this as one of the criteria he is using to decide which countries will be allowed to have people come here at all. And it's going to be potentially these countries could also end up having their immigration applications paused if they're on this travel ban list. We don't know the full list, currently 19 of them, but they're going to be expanding it. Also, though, on a related point, federal agents are already deploying to Minneapolis to begin deporting Somalians. And local officials there are now defending the Somali community. And they're saying you can't judge everybody by the actions of a few people. This is Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey during a press conference on Tuesday. Watch.
We are here to respond to a number of credible reports from several media outlets relaying that there are as many as 100 federal agents that will be deployed to the Twin Cities with a specific focus on targeting our Somali community. To our Somali community, we love you and we stand with you. That commitment is rock solid. Minneapolis is proud to be home to the largest Somali community in the entire country. They've been here for decades in many instances. They're entrepreneurs and fathers. They benefit both the culture and the economic resilience of our city. Targeting Somali people means that due process will be violated. Mistakes will be made. And let's be clear, it means that American citizens will be detained for no other reason than the fact that they look like they are Somali. That is not now and will never be a legitimate reason.
Now, one of the big allegations against the ICE stops and the raids, and one of the foundations of a lot of the media criticisms, they're saying that federal agents are stopping people, questioning them, sometimes American citizens, sometimes on the basis of racial profiling, because they may believe they're illegal aliens. Now, in response to this, in a post on this, Homeland Security actually stated, quote, "Stop fear-mongering. ICE does not arrest or deport U.S. citizens." There's an important point in language here. There's a difference between stopping and questioning someone versus arresting and deporting somebody. But they say, if a U.S. citizen is arrested, it is because they have obstructed or assaulted law enforcement, which is the basis of a lot of the claims from the media where they're saying, ICE arrested an American citizen. And ICE often clarifies, yeah, we arrested them because they were obstructing an arrest. Now they add, quote, "What makes someone a target for immigration enforcement is if they are illegally in the U.S., not their skin color, race, or ethnicity. Secretary Noem has been clear, rioters will not stop us or slow us down." On that point also, though, the Supreme Court determined this. It's now clear they are allowed to do some racial profiling. And people disagree with it. You can have whatever opinion you want on it. But that is actually deemed legal for ICE. They're allowed to stop people and question people on the basis of suspicion. And sometimes suspicion is you look like you're from, a country that maybe they're looking for people from, like Somalia or Venezuela or something like that. So there is some of that taking place. All right, that said, a lot more going on right now. The double tap controversy is unraveling. This is with the Pentagon. And also, they have a suspect arrest of the J6 pipe bomb. We'll be talking about this after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just a pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. The whole controversy over the so-called double tap airstrike on a drug trafficking boat is slowly unraveling. Basically, there were allegations coming out in the big corporate media that the Pentagon had blown up a Venezuelan drug trafficking boat. There were survivors and they blew them up again. And even the big corporate media, many of them are now acknowledging that the statement, originally Washington Post is one of the main ones, did not have the evidence to support the claim. And so even on that front, it doesn't really hold up. But media, of course, it's been a feeding frenzy, and one echoes the next. They play a game of telephone, and they build scandals on top of disinformation, and then scandals on top of the scandals, and then rumors on top of the scandals, until they can create just ongoing headlines, which basically have nothing to stand on. That's the way the story has gone. It's now falling to pieces. And veterans are also now stepping forward to say what I've been saying as well. And you can agree with it or not on a moral level, but this type of practice during airstrikes on terrorists is actually really common. America does this. It is part of the way we do airstrikes, and you can disagree with it, but it is part of the rules of engagement. Now, this is Mark Lucas, veteran and founder of the Article 3 Project. He says this, quote, "The double tap war crimes hoax is a complete joke." He said, "I've personally called in airstrikes in Afghanistan as an infantry rifle platoon leader." He said, quote, "My battalion commander nicknamed me Bombardier 6 because I love dropping 500-pound bombs on the enemy." He says the military doesn't get one chance to destroy the enemy, meaning if you blow them up and they survive, you can blow them up again. And that is the way America does it. And you can criticize it, but it's what we did during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and against ISIS and against the Houthis. He adds, quote, "Enjoy this classic footage from an AC-130 gunship destroying enemy fighters during the global war on terror. Warning, there are a lot of double taps." I won't show you that video because it's terrorists being blown up, but anybody who's been following the news, I mean, since the Bush administration, and look, people used to criticize Barack Obama. There were like Onion articles saying that when he left office, that a Predator drone was like a puppy waiting for him to come home, and are you really going to leave me, master, with like the Predator drone, because he used so many airstrikes. If you want to call into question the legitimacy or morality of this, frankly, it's every president going back to at least Bush, all right? Because this has been the standard form of engagement in the war on terror. They blow them up and then they blow them up again until they're all dead. And that is how we've been fighting the wars when it comes to these airstrikes. Now, also on that point, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is saying the Pentagon is rolling out a brand new plan to maybe enhance the use of these types of strikes, including with smaller drones. Watch this.
After the Cold War, U.S. defense spending as a percentage of GDP dropped significantly. The War Department budgeted for quality over quantity. That served us well for 30 years. However, we now find ourselves in a new era, an era of cheap, disposable battlefield drones. We cannot be left behind. We must invest in inexpensive unmanned platforms that have proved so effective. One of my priorities is rebuilding our military. We can't do that by doing business the same way we have in the past. We cannot afford to shoot down cheap drones with $2 million missiles, and we ourselves must be able to field large quantities of capable attack drones. In July, I stripped away regulations handicapping our adoption of small drones, shifting authorities from the resident bureaucracy to unit commanders. This was the first step in the urgent effort to boost lethality across the force. The second step is to kickstart U.S. industrial capacity and reduce prices so our military can adequately budget for unmanned weapons. With help from our partners in Congress, we're going to solve this problem, starting with small attack drones. Drone Dominance is a billion-dollar program funded by President Trump's Big, Beautiful Bill. It is purpose-built on the pillars of the War Department's new acquisition philosophy, a stable demand signal to expand the U.S. drone industrial base by leveraging private capital paired with flexible contracting built for commercial companies founded by our best engineers and entrepreneurs. Drone Dominance will do two things: drive costs down and capabilities up. We will deliver tens of thousands of small drones to our force in 2026 and hundreds of thousands of them by 2027. I will soon be meeting with the military services to discuss transformational changes in warfighting doctrine. We need to outfit our combat units with unmanned systems at scale. We cannot wait. The funding provided by the Big Beautiful Bill is ready to be used to mount an effective sprint to build combat power. At the Department of War, we're adopting new technologies with a fight tonight philosophy so that our warfighters have the cutting-edge tools they need to prevail.
Now, a couple important points on this. First of all, the war between Russia and Ukraine has made drone warfare the new face of war. Really, it's one of the first major wars we've witnessed between militaries using modern military equipment. What you're seeing is basically the Russia-China side of the world and their weaponry up against the weaponry of the Western world, the United States, European allies, and they're facing off. You have modern tanks, modern guns, cutting-edge weaponry. And what are they using? They're using little drones you can buy on the internet to blow each other up. They're using little tiny drones to go and blow up tanks. They're using little tiny drones to go and swoop people out of foxholes. And that is war now. It is kind of a terrible form of war, frankly. You think you're going to go and die with honor, and a little tiny robot goes and blows your face up. But that is the new face of war. Basically all modern militaries, even not modern militaries, are now looking into it. Even the drug cartels are starting to use drones now, by the way, including killing police officers and using them for targeted assassinations in Mexico. They're already doing it. The issue America has, though, and with a lot of countries, if anybody's tried to buy a decent drone on the internet, you might have found something. Basically, there are not really US-made ones. Almost all the major drone manufacturing companies are Chinese. And if you want to talk about wartime production, that is a big problem. Even for police, that is a big problem. Because if you're using these drones from China, and the technology and software and firmware is from China, that is a risk. They can shut them down, they can remote control them, they may be relaying data back to China. You can't have it. And so what Pete Hegseth is talking about here is basically sparking domestic production, partly on drones, but not limited to it. They want to have wartime production brought back to the United States. And this is a really big deal. This has been something hugely lacking for the United States, to the extent there were reports that came out during the Biden administration saying if America were to get involved in a major world war, mainly with China, if we were to go to war with China tomorrow, we would lose, according to this report, not because of our fighting ability, not because of the lack of, strength, but because we lack wartime production. We offshored all the factories, we offshored all the mines, we offshored all the timber, we offshored basically everything. And if we're going to fight a war, we need to have it here. You need to not be dependent on China for your medicine. You need to not be dependent on China for your drones. You need to not be dependent on them for steel or for rare earth minerals. You need to have it here or somewhere where you could safely have it in transit in the event of a war. And what Pete Hegseth is talking about now is doing that, bringing wartime production home. And why does that matter also? Wartime production will not just be for wartime. If they bring steel, American steel back, that'll support other industries. If they bring rare earth minerals here, that's other industries. If they bring back the entire logistical chain, which ties to a lot of industries, it could be used for wartime production. And remember, during wartime production, you need to basically, during World War II, even car manufacturers switched to making tanks. Even car manufacturers switched to making airplanes, right? The things you would need to support a full-scale war would not be turned on for that purpose unless you had to, and America lacks that currently. And so this also means returning just American production, American factories, American mining, American, basically the entire supply chain tied in with production. That's all coming back according to them. And we'll see whether they do it and how fast they do it. Now, like also, meanwhile, even affordable housing in the United States is not necessarily affordable. You might have noticed this if you tried renting or buying a home lately. But something interesting is happening. Prices are suddenly going down. Why is this? They're saying prices are going down because people are being deported on a very large scale, actually. And on that point as well, the Department of Homeland Security is now using the prospect of lower rent to promote its tip line to report illegal aliens. And here's what they say. DHS, want affordable housing? Help report illegal aliens in your area. Call 866-DHS-2-ICE. Meaning, if you want to be able to afford a home, deport your local illegal alien. That is DHS saying it. And this is kind of interesting on another level, though. Let me explain. The whole concept, it's still controversial in the United States, but it's not in other countries. It is generally recognized in other countries that mass migration causes rents to go up. It makes an affordability crisis. In America, for some reason, we don't talk about it. In other countries, this is part of the normal conversation. In Canada, which is a lot further left than American politics, they don't even have a Republican-Democrat party. They basically have the Democrat and Socialist Party, right? They're very far left by our standards. In Canada, this is not controversial. This is part of the normal discussion. It's how the politicians on both sides of the aisle discuss it for the most, not all of them, but for the most part. It has been acknowledged on this for years. They talk about it openly. The media talk about it. They've even passed laws about it because they have acknowledged in Canada mass migration causes the lack of affordability, and it causes the cost of homes to skyrocket. You can't afford a home because of mass migration. This is Yahoo Finance in Canada in October, and let me show you what they're doing in Canada. It says, quote, Canada's population growth has slowed dramatically after the federal government dialed back immigration targets, a shift that's beginning to cool rent increases and stabilize job markets, a new TD Economics report says. Who would have thought? They're not even deporting people, they're just slowing down the importing of new people. And they're saying that thanks to this, rents are going down and there are more jobs available. What a concept. It says further in, quote, in response to concerns that rapid immigration was contributing to housing affordability challenges and labor market strain, Ottawa launched a plan to tighten targets for non-permanent and permanent residents, allowing infrastructure to catch up. Meaning, like I've been saying, if you're going to import people, you got to build the same number of homes or they're going to compete with the existing resources and it's going to hurt the people of your country. In Canada, they acknowledge this. In Canada, this is not controversial. They continue stating, TD Economics states that the effects of this adjustment are now evident in slower population growth and reduced pressure across housing and labor markets, meaning this is not a rumor, this is not a speculation, it is a proven effect that mass migration, if new construction does not keep pace with it, causes the lack of affordability. And if you want to fix it, you need to give the infrastructure time to catch up with it. What a concept. Further in, it states this. In the purpose-built rental market, slower immigration has led to a softer rent growth forecast of 3 to 3.5% in 2026, roughly half the pace seen in 2024. However, Karanki notes that lower interest rates are also encouraging more Canadians to buy homes, while government efforts have also boosted rental construction, meaning they're building more houses and they're not having crazy interest rates like we are in the United States because thanks Federal Reserve for raising the interest rates. It says in a modeled scenario where population growth had remained higher, average rent growth from 2025 to 2027 would be approximately 5.5%. 2 percentage points higher than the current forecast. And they say dwindling immigration numbers are also cooling demand in the condominium market, both for ownership and secondary rentals, something that has caused downward pressure, meaning people are buying up the homes and then renting them out. And a lot of people were buying them from China and India and Canada, which they placed restrictions on because they acknowledge it. It's making it so that they were driving up the cost of rents, and it was making it so that Canadians couldn't get by. It says that something that has caused downward pressure on asking rents across major cities because they bought up the properties, they set the prices, they locked it in, and Canadians could barely afford to live because of mass migration and foreign purchases of homes. That is the reason they give there. It is not controversial here. When will America decide it's not controversial here? Well, the DHS is now suggesting that this is a cause of it, and maybe we should look at the way other countries view it because, frankly, Canada's a lot further left than we are, and they have no problem talking about it. Now, look, meanwhile, a suspect has now been arrested in the case on January 6, 2021, where an individual planted pipe bombs at both party headquarters in Washington, D.C., right when the whole protests and riots on J6 were taking place. It should be noted, when they say disruption of an official proceeding, these evil people shut down the counting of the Electoral College votes. Legally and technically, it was the pipe bombs that stalled things initially. It was the pipe bombs that did that. It was the pipe bombs that canceled the events at the Capitol building because the Trump administration, the team basically, they had planned events, they had the permits for it. It was the pipe bombs that shut that down. The pipe bombs were the biggest story, and finally they're talking about it. Let me show you what happened. CNBC, the FBI on Thursday morning arrested a suspect believed to have planted pipe bombs outside the Republican and Democratic Party headquarters prior to the January 6, 2021 Capitol riots, MS Now reported. It says, the arrest is a major breakthrough in the nearly 5-year federal investigation. Were they really investigating it? Which did not detonate. These were apparently live bombs and they didn't detonate, meaning they actually could have killed people, but they didn't. It says the suspect, whose identity has yet to be revealed, is charged with setting the bombs by the party's headquarters in Washington, D.C. 4 people with knowledge of the development told MS Now. And it says a law enforcement official said that police have now determined a motive. Have not yet determined a motive, MS Now reported. It adds the suspect has been linked to statements that show support for an anarchist ideology. Now, which major organization or movement in the United States supports an anarchist ideology? Who are the anarchists who engage in violence in America? Who are those people? I assume it's Antifa. Where was Antifa? Does anybody find it odd that Antifa was going around beating up Trump supporters, launching attacks, every single event, whether a small-scale speaking event or a major one, Antifa showed up. And when did they not show up? When were they absent? On January 6th. Fair question. Were they there or were they not? Were they dressing up as Trump supporters and causing problems? Well, we don't know a lot of that because some of the people were never arrested, including some of the worst ones. What about the J6 pipe bomber? Well, we don't know, but what we do know now is that according to 2 people allegedly briefed on this, the suspect had shown support for an anarchist ideology. More details to come, but that is a pretty big deal. Now it says the discoveries that led to the arrest did not come from new evidence, and this is where it gets really interesting. This arrest was not based on new evidence, but rather it says from the same trove of materials that had mostly been gathered in 2021 and 2022, according to 2 sources on that telling MS Now. Why is that a big deal? Because the FBI has set up tip lines. If you know who this person is, tell us. Huge rewards, grainy footage. They're now releasing footage that's not so grainy. I wonder why that is. It turns out the evidence they needed to carry out the arrest was already there in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. They already had the evidence. Raising questions, if they had the evidence, why did they not arrest the person? Very good questions to be asking. They are saying this is going to turn into an embarrassment for the agencies that were involved with this. It's going to raise a lot of questions as to why they did not act on that evidence in 2021 and 2022 when they were hunting down like grandmas and so on and breaking down people's doors and, you know, holding guns to the faces of like people and their children and arresting them and throwing them in solitary confinement based on nothing more than like trespassing charges. When an individual who did the worst thing that day, the planting of pipe bombs, was let to go scot-free. Why did they do that? Well, we don't know, but maybe they'll tell us now because they've now they now have a suspect. And again, innocent until proven guilty, we don't really know. They do say something important though. So the Blaze had written an article claiming based on the gait, the way a person walks, that they claimed they knew a suspect. I noted there were gaps in the analysis. I noted that measuring a person's gait is not a solid enough way of actually accusing somebody. They kind of put all their cards in and they accuse somebody directly. It turns out it wasn't that person. It is not the person the Blaze claimed it was, the suspect. It says here, last month, a conservative news site named a former U.S. Capitol Police officer as a possible match for the pipe bomber based largely on a gait analysis, again, the way you walk. It says the FBI poured cold water on that story, and the accused officer, the one that they named, she cleared her name. She was able to show a video of her playing with her puppies at the time the bombs were placed, meaning she wasn't there, CBS News reported. The suspect is not the person that they had claimed it was. And we'll see what happens with that. It's somebody else, and we'll find out. But this is we'll see what comes out from this. It could be big, it could be not. There are going to be some real questions, though. The biggest one, if they had evidence 2021 and 2022, why did they not arrest the person? And the second big piece that's going to be very important, what is the ideology of the person? If they had an anarchist ideology, were they part of Antifa? And did that tie into why the person was not arrested? We don't know yet. We will find out. But this is a very big deal. All right, that's it. Questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. And first off, let's see here. Foggy01, you're saying, why does the left want third world countries to be called developing countries? And they are saying they should develop into a more, are they saying they should develop into a more civil country? Good question. Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of funny thing. When a name or a designation is created that suggests a disability or a lack of quality, people start to use it as an insult, right? We call our friends the name. And then over time, because we start to call people that, third world country, other names, people find it offensive because it starts to carry the connotation of poor or stupid or whatever else. And then they have to change the name. This is why they say you shouldn't call people homeless. You should call them housing impaired. It used to be that calling someone retarded was a medical terminology. In fact, I was actually watching some reruns of Mystery Science Theater 3000 recently. And they had, it was online, they had the commercials from like the 90s in there, and they had a commercial come up and it was like, help the retarded. And it was an actual commercial of like donate money to help people who are mentally challenged. But they called them retarded. This was in the 90s. That is now a bad word. It's kind of not anymore because we kind of rolled back the clock. That was a medical terminology. It was not regarded as offensive. For a long while, it was regarded as offensive. You weren't allowed to say it. You're kind of allowed to say it again. The reason is because it carried other connotations. They kind of changed the language on this. And so it's the same thing with developing countries. In the time of like Karl Marx talked about the third world countries, right? this used to be a non-offensive terminology, and it does basically imply backwards countries, countries that don't have means to sustain themselves by modern living standards. You don't have plumbing. China is considered a third world country, even though you have all these TikTok videos of these moth IQ people posting, where again 600 million people are living in extreme poverty. You're talking like $140 a month. There are a lot of third world countries. And the big question is, can they be developing countries? Oh, they're not third world countries. They're in the process of changing, as Foggy 01 states. They're not there yet, but they're learning. The big question with a lot of these countries is that the case? Because the big experiment for a long time is that if you take people from third world countries and you bring them to first world countries, they will become first world people. They will no longer be people from third world countries. Has that been the experiment? According to Donald Trump and according to Republicans, no, it has not. They're now suggesting that quality of life, society, third world behaviors are tied to culture, and they're tied to the way those countries work. And if you bring people in, they basically bring that culture and they establish third world countries and first world countries. And that is the allegation Trump is actually using now to suggest he doesn't want migration anymore from third world countries. He's saying directly, when you bring these people in, they don't integrate, they don't create wealth, they create poverty, they go on welfare. And even if you have a first-generation immigrant who creates a good life, oftentimes their children do not. They go back to the culture of the country they came from, and they create third world countries in the United States or in Europe. And that's why you have no-go zones. That's why you have cartels. That's why you have gangs. That's why you have massive, welfare communities. And that's like, you can agree with it or not, but this is literally what this is what Trump is saying. And you can call him a racist for saying it. He's even acknowledging that, just saying he doesn't even care anymore. So don't shoot the messenger. I'm just the journalist telling you what they're saying, okay? But that is what they're saying now. And I don't know. And again, is that the case? I don't know. Personally, I do know people from third world countries whose children are not like that. And so I am of the camp who says you can't judge all of them like this, frankly. Maybe you want to blame the welfare state, frankly. But on the broader scale, if you want to look at the broader scale, it is in fact the case. It is in fact the case when you look at the overall picture. So that is unfortunate, but that is the reality. Benelmark 9671, you're saying, at least the Trump administration is trying. Here in Canada, we have no ICE and basically no law and order unless you're a conservative-minded person, and then they don't think twice about looking you up. Yeah, I've heard about that. One day America will free Alberta, by the way. Alberta will be free. Alberta longs for America. They long to be the 51st state. We all know it. By the way, Belmark, I don't mean to question you, are you from Alberta? Just curious. Alberta is like the Texas of Canada. If Alberta wanted to join America, I'd take them any day of the week. And by the way, you notice that Trump stopped talking about calling Canada the 51st state. I don't know if that's still on the table or not, but he was talking about it for a while. On your point, though, you're saying that basically in Canada, you don't have any means of dealing with this problem. And what you're saying that is if you're a conservative-minded person, you feel you're being persecuted for having your values or perspectives. That if you even talk about this stuff, you might have, I don't know, like a moose and a guy riding up, show up at your door, and they knock and say, "Time to go to the gulag, eh?" Right? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I'm aware. I know life. I know it's actually very difficult in Canada right now. You're dealing with some kind of crazy policies, and you're dealing with a very rough quality of life because it's so, like, rents are crazy high and there are a lot of restrictions on new construction. Quality of life in Canada is really being decimated for the average Canadian. And I understand the problem we have is that while it is relatively acceptable for the media to even talk about, hey, mass migration is causing the rents to go up, if you as a Canadian citizen were to criticize that, you do risk having the same thing happen in the UK, where the police might come knocking at your door and say, hey, you made an offensive statement online, time to go to jail. It's very similar in Canada as it is to the United Kingdom. And maybe that's changing. I will add one more thing to that point. The new US policy under the State Department, where the United States is now as a form of foreign diplomacy, stating that mass migration is a human rights abuse, that the policies of mass migration are harming the human rights of the Western world, that Western civilization is being harmed by it, that it represents a literal human rights abuse, and that the natives, whether you're Canadian, and look, what do you call a native? Do you call it the Native Canadians or the Native Americans who frankly conquered and enslaved each other all over the place? Who do you call the native if they conquered as well? Well, call it what you will, but I'll say the people of Canada and the people of America who formed the countries as they currently are, their lives, their well-beings, their livelihoods, their cultures are in fact being decimated by mass migration. This is now the official diplomatic policy of the US State Department. And they're saying that as a form of diplomacy, they're going to engage with other countries, and this is mostly Western world, on this point, that the facilitation of mass migration is a human rights abuse against the people of your country. That will be Canada as America engages with Canada. That will be the UK as America engages with the UK. That will be France, that will be Germany, that will be the Nordic countries, that will be basically all of them. So while you may feel, and it was acknowledged by the State Department in their public statement, the problem you're raising as well, which is if you feel you're being abused by these policies in your country and you criticize it, you face being punished, but other people don't. The United States is also going to start standing up for your rights if you feel that you are being silenced, if you feel you're not allowed to speak about this. This is now part of U.S. foreign engagement, and this will be part of the diplomatic process America is engaging in with its allies, including Canada. Sandy Sefkick, you're saying words have meaning and always have. Just because a group wants to change it doesn't mean you have to play along. I agree, Sandy. I agree. People get offended by everything. That's the reality of it. I mean, I believe in being nice. Okay, look, I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial. I think it's healthy to insult each other a little bit. And why is that? Okay, maybe not for women, but for men. This is how guys talk to each other. It's kind of how we refine each other a little bit. If you were to go back in the 90s and hear how me and my friends talk to each other, and how probably most of your friends groups among guys talk to each other, and probably still do behind closed doors, you would be shocked. Because we call each other every name in the book, and we mean it lovingly. We love each other. We're bros, and that's how we talk to each other. We insult each other because we love each other. That's how guys talk to each other. And part of that is, of course, I'd say a kind of a, iron sharpens iron. Was it steel sharpens steel, iron sharpens iron? It's how we refine each other. We make it so that you're not as offended by these things. And I would say even humor. Look, what did we think of as funny in the 90s and early 2000s, or let alone the 80s, right? Was Richard Pryor offensive? Maybe. Was Dave Chappelle offensive? Maybe. But we thought it was funny. We all laughed together at it. I would actually say that sometimes being able to make fun of to an extent, right? There's a limit to it, but to an extent, does actually make things less offensive, because we can laugh about it. When you can laugh about your differences, when you can acknowledge the traits of where you come from, like people make fun of who I am, I don't care. It makes you a little tougher as a person, but also it makes it less offensive overall. And so I think we as a society have become too offended by everything. We're offended by everything these days. And what do you have? You have a bunch of pansies. You have a bunch of pansies who find the entire world offensive, and they can't live a happy life because everything offends them. And that is a terrible way to live, right? They need to quit being such pansies, right? And they need to toughen up a little bit and quit being so offended by everything, and everyone will be happier if we can quit taking everything so dang serious, right? We got to take things a little lighter, right? Chill out, right? Call each other some names in an endearing way, and we'll all be happier. All right, that said, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Do you agree with me or not? Am I being controversial? Do you think we need to make friendly insults great again? Tell me in the chat. Don't say things that are going to get me banned on YouTube, but tell me in the chat. Also, join me again tomorrow. We're going to be having Prime Time, which we have, it's on and off because we all travel so much. But Prime Time's a fantastic show between Epoch Times and NTD Television. You can watch it tomorrow night. Be sure to tune in. And we all enjoy doing it. We have a lot of fun doing that show. That said, thank you so much for being here. As always, thank you so much. See you on Monday for the next episode of Crossroads. And in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.